We of Word Up acknowledge that some of us are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe and Huron-Wendat people. Word Up is dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. So tonight we've got two authors. We have Robert Colman from Newmarket, and we have Claudiu Murgan. So Claudiu is enthralled by human consciousness and the notion of our place in the enormous wheels of the universe. His settings as science fiction, fantasy, or eco-fiction focus on describing the beauty of Mother Nature and demanding action from all of us. He's the author of two novels, The Decadence of Our Souls from 2017 and Water Entanglement 2018. Water Entanglement is a speculative fiction novel about the real meaning of water in our lives, a manifesto that brings awareness to our water crisis impacting us as a species. Claudiu's experience in various industries such as IT, renewable energy, real estate and finance helped him create complex but real characters and brought forward meaningful messages. Claudiu is a co-founder of the Immigrant Writers Association of Toronto and the vice president of Authorpedia Foundation, the world's only encyclopedia for authors. You can hear the radio and TV interviews that he gave in the last 12 months at claudiumurgan.com. We're gonna make sure it's actually already shared on our website. We'll probably share it again on the Word Up page. So everybody, Claudiu Murgan, yay.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. I'm going to read a fragment from the first chapter of Crystal Cloud, which is my upcoming novel. It's the sequel to Water Entanglement. And as Linda mentioned, it's an eco-fiction about the dire situation of water. I also combine water with crystals as a healing medium for some of our health issues, and everything is related to consciousness, because in my opinion, we cannot evolve unless we go to the next level of consciousness and awareness vis-a-vis of what's going on around us and our connection with Mother Nature. So chapter 1. In Cherry Mortinger's nightmares, water and wind faced off in battle as howling tornadoes, hurricanes, and torrential rainstorms. Shards of ice mercilessly pierced metal roofs, brick buildings, and flesh, mincing everything senseless in its path. Wind unleashed a ruthless interrogation of water as it demanded proof of humanity's innocence for misdeeds that happened not so long ago. Water screamed and twisted, but refused to break her silence. She would rather endure blow after blow, suffering intimidation and abuse for mankind's mistakes. Neither side would relent, forcing Cherry to wake in a cold sweat, knowing her beloved earth was left the innocent victim every time. Cherry gasped at the vividness of the memory of these nightmares, even at noonday, and the clarity of her responsibilities as both an activist and limnologist became more evident. She knew water's humanistic secret. Its crystallographic patterns remembered every evolutionary cycle on Earth, every birth of a child, every thought of doubt or happiness. Water had witnessed timid and supple seedlings of oak, beech, sycamore, silver maple, European ash, Douglas fir, and more grow into old forest at liberty to expand unencumbered. No one had challenged the forest for its obsession of conquering new lands and claiming its own. Far into the past, water did not cry. Only much later, water witnessed the decimation of the wise overstory and learned about pain, suffering, and senseless death. Her memory was changed forever now, storing the history of the planet and its civilizations. Water's innocence melted in a fuzzy molecular structure that science only recently classified as unhappiness. From the safety of her windowless bungalow office in Toronto, Cherry shook the nightmare from her mind and stood firmly. She glanced over at Hyen's mask for the first time since the United Nations resolution related to the awakening of water and its repercussions on Earth had passed. I'm a limnologist and water activist, she said out loud, as if to remind herself of her credentials in this unstable world. I'm registered with Water for All, and I should be able to handle this. She shook her head. Who was she kidding? She could barely keep track of the environmental changes threatening to collapse delicate ecosystems all over the world. She perused through the reports on her iPad screen. Reports from Brazil, Peru, southern US states, China, and India, issued by environmental agencies or not-for-profit entities, were beyond frantic, all pointing to the enormous ecological stress from continuous deforestation, wildfires, increased dead zones in the oceans, or uninterrupted rains followed by devastating tornadoes. Unable to ignore the hysteria or deny her research, she brushed the moisture from her upper lip and turned away. It's quantum entanglement. The structural changes on a molecular level in the Ganges River that had replicated within hours to those of the Jordan River left no doubt in Jerry's mind that the quantum entanglement concept applied to almost everything else in nature. Quantum characteristics such as storing information, self-information, and self-organizing prove the behavioral nature of the organism. Only certain scientists understood this, Cherry included. Now, the media seem to be catching on, even labeled the phenomenon the awakening of water. She envisioned the UN resolution signed by all member countries would be a welcome respite from a GDP-focused mentality that had driven the economies and the consumerism to dizzying heights. The awakening of water had given everyone the necessary slap in the face. For the last 6 months of 2057, the occurrences in Asia and South America of water changing its molecular structure had ceased, thus reinforcing the compliance of all UN signatories. She picked up the mask and held it reverently in her hands. Now, using her hidden identity as Hain, Cherry aimed to deliver a friendly yet firm message to her followers, while the world's biggest companies were still busy negotiating compensation for the loss of profits. It was a stratagem that, as long as the politicians continued to turn a blind eye, would be inserted in major trade agreements between powerful countries. Cherry compared this approach to a polite dinner guest who suddenly turns nasty, claims ownership of her house, and demands a hefty payment before leaving. At any moment, any of the other guests might make a similar claim, leaving Cherry miffed and broke, both emotionally and financially. Cherry positioned the tablet on her desk and got closer so the mask will cover most of the screen. Her hacker friends in the anonymous group would make the message available, posting it in a location that couldn't be traced back to her. Seeing renowned companies haggling over a dry bone and human DNA feature too hard to remove was still a sore sight for the 8.5 billion people who had no choice but to endure the consequences of the world's major industries coming to a halt. She always felt annoyed by how predictable institutions and individuals had become in a time of crisis. Now, that feeling was exacerbated by the openness of the same players asking for undeserved financial compensations. Certain economies had to be saved, not bail out. Cherry had read how this had happened many times in the past. Financial giants, those backing products with money that seemed to be pulled from thin air, owned the politicians. Tired of being told what to do by companies controlling their purse strings, governments had agreed to accept nationalizations. It was a concept hated by those who had embraced capitalism to justify their outrageous and unethically generated profits. She clutched the mask to her breast and breathed in the familiar smell of the wood. The important egocentric CEOs would either take early retirement or become full-time government employees. Playing by the rules and reporting to bureaucrats would push most of them into settling for the former. Cherry took a deep breath and slipped Hein's mask on her face. It felt natural, empowering, and right. After checking the strap at the back of her head, she stood upright with confidence. There was no risk to being identified by any government-run face recognition software, and she smiled knowingly behind the facade. She gently caressed the aged wood with metal insertions on its outer edges, like new skin. Hai's identity had become hers, replacing her teardrop-shaped face, blue eyes, and pixie blonde haircut with a certain power and dignity only the mask could command. By being Hain, she could expose shady deals between corrupt governments and corporations, willing to buy their way in for water and oil rights with little or no respect for the will of the people. Switching between the identities was a conscious move. It ensured against memory blackouts. the liability of her actions was hers and hers alone. She motioned to her iPad to begin the recording. "Hello, my friends," she said, her voice confident and dark. "We all should be proud of the latest achievement, of a consensus of how badly we have treated the environment. Science couldn't explain the radical molecular transformations water went through in 2055. Sadly, people died, and we had to trigger significant changes in our global community. Halting oil and gas explorations in environmentally sensitive areas, reevaluating the intensive water usage for monocropping agriculture, and limiting air traffic had impacted all of us. The readjustment made us believe we suddenly switched from a period of abundance to one of scarcity. We knew a wake-up call was imminent, but as usual, our stubbornness threw another pinch of pixie dust at us, warping our minds against the lie that we kept telling ourselves that everything is fine and we couldn't possibly experience calamity in our lifetimes. Seemed that even the prolonged water restrictions in the highly populated cities on every continent sent a message few took seriously. Prevention has never been humanity's forte, damage control is. We would rather spend our money, time, and resources after the fact than be creative prior to the disaster. For the first time, Cherry didn't feel the urge to scratch any itch or wipe perspiration from her hidden face. Her words evoked a tranquil awareness trailing from her lips with a firm cadence, even if the mask's narrow mouth slit made them sound slightly muffled. She dreaded the extensive water restrictions in Toronto, a temporary measure until additional industrial filters were added to the treatment plants serving the city. Lately, the trade winds that reached the eastern part of Canada with African dust were pushed forward inland and picked by the Maritime's own gap winds and capricious weather, exposing Toronto to increased health challenges. I know some of you will smirk at my calling it a consensus. I admit, and it's no secret, the accord has been imposed on select companies for the greater good with disregard to the optics that in capitalism, only the fittest survive. And because these entities couldn't understand that not even the well-prepared and competent had a chance against the fluid fury behind the consequence of our actions, they had to be forcefully told. You know what I stand for, and still I agree with this approach. Thank you. So some of this stuff is happening now. I envision that it's going to happen 30 years from now, but I was wrong. I have to admit that. And it's sad.
So just so everyone knows, I have muted you all, so you'll have to unmute yourselves if you want to talk.
They're unmuted. Does anyone have any questions? Questions about the story or his writing process or how he came to come to the story?
I'm interested in the, if I understood right, the molecular change of water. And I'm curious as to what you feel that change is, or is it identified in the book? And how can it still be water if that molecular change takes place?
We know from Dr. Masaru Emoto research, and not only his, that if water is exposed to various feelings or vibrations, it changes its molecular structure. And it is well documented. It's muddy if it's the sentiment or the feeling you expose it to, it's that of hate, and it's a very crystalline hexagonal shape if you expose it to love, gratitude, compassion. And my idea was that that's why water entanglement is the title of the first book. The quantum physics principle applies to everything in nature, and that will apply to water as well. So suddenly in my story, water awakens, becomes a main character in the plot. And she changes the molecular structure in such a way that mimics the pH of water changes. It becomes corrosive and attacks the skin of our bodies. So it changes in the Ganges River, which is a kind of a sacred river. And people are baffled by that change because they all love the Ganga, same molecular structure within minutes and hours is being replicated in other rivers across the world. It's like a punishment for what we are doing to Mother Nature. That was the main idea. And it's kind of an awakening telling us, you guys have to stop. And it's punishing us even further by chasing the CEOs and the management of oil and gas companies, of water bottling companies. So this is part of the plot in water entanglement. And because of the water has healing properties, and you go back into ancient history through baptists and shamans, and they all use water with certain properties. Monks pray over water. So I bring all these things into the story. And at the beginning of water entanglement, at Water for All conference, an explosion takes place. And one particular person is being targeted, is Kahuna from Hawaii, their spiritual leader. But he is brought back from a coma through crystal implants, which filtered structure water, which the shamans in Hawaii prayed over. So the idea is the water will filter through the crystal and will connect through nanobots to the pineal gland, enhancing or bringing back the locomotor functions and the brain functions, because the water retains the information of this world. Everything what happened in the world is retained in one molecule of water. And it's not necessarily in the water, but in the energy field around the molecule of water. So all that information with the prayer, imbued with the prayer and the positive feeling, brings this guy back to life. And then the neurosurgeon who developed the technology will try to apply the same technology and the same approach to other medical cases. And this is the subject of Crystal Cloud, where they think some people will be brought from a medical coma back to life. Others want the implants in order to connect to a crystal cloud and enjoy more kind of a decadent life or play video games online. But to their surprise, they will go to the next level of consciousness and understand their mistakes, understand how they should live their life in a much more aware way than they've been doing it before. So a joke, let's say a joke or a silly way of looking at crystals turned into a very serious point of view to assess your life and your life purpose. Hopefully I answer your question.
Yeah, well, yes, and beyond. Yes, very interesting. I'm not even aware of some of these concepts and tests that you.
I wrote an article. I wrote an article, "The Conscious Awakening of Water." It's a blog on my website. It was also published in online Italian online magazine 2 months ago. When I talk about this type of properties water has and how we should look at water from a different angle.
When did you write this? My apologies for the construction zone in the background. I'll mute myself when I'm done, but because I like one of your phrases in there was they didn't think they would be living through this in their lifetime or something like that. Now, did you write this before the pandemic?
Oh yes, it was. So I finished the first novel. I published in 2017, and then right after I started in October 2017, I started Water Entanglement. And 2017, yeah, October 2017, and I went through it very, very fast. I don't know how it was downloaded or whatever, it happened very fast. So I published it in 2018. And I didn't know that I'm going to write a sequel. But after I published it and I read it again, I realized that I left so many things in consciousness. I left so many things untold and hanging in the air that I said I have to go back and close all these loops. So I had to, go deep in within and find another the subject and the plot, and I was able to put everything together. So in the end, yes, we will have these crystal clouds, and there will be kind of shungite clouds, because shungite has a very interesting properties. The crystal clears the water of all its negativity, all its bacteria, and it's quite an interesting type of crystal. That's the only crystal who does that. So I bring that back into the story, and in the end, we are all connected, but we are not, supervised or monitored by the government. It's another way of escaping.
Hi, I'm not sure if this is working or not, is it?
It does, yeah, we can
Good,
hear you.
okay. You answered my question first off, and I've always had a kind of interest in this. I just wanted to elaborate on one of the points of you mentioning Dr. Emoto. And for those who might not know, there's a movie called, I think it's What the Bleep Do We Know Down the Rabbit Hole, and he explains his experiment, and our bodies are basically like the earth. They're almost 80% water. And he took water, and as it was freezing, he had a group of people say really nice things to the water and compliment the water and try to make the water feel good. And another group of people he spoke to, he told them to talk to the water mean and be derogatory and insult it. And he noticed that the crystals that formed for the people that talked nicely to the water, the crystals formed beautiful. They were very, the design of, I can't remember.
Hexagonal, yeah, hexagonal.
Yeah, they were very beautiful crystalline structures, but the ones that were spoken to derogatorily and mean, they were all out of proportion. They weren't beautiful as we perceive beauty. They weren't like we normally think of the crystals. So I guess his thesis is you speak nice to water, it reacts nice within you. You speak mean to water, it reacts mean within you. So when you're talking to somebody else and their body is 80% water and you're mean to them, it has a physiological impact on their bodies, their well-being, and the water inside them. And that was part of it. And I'm really fascinated on your book. I'll have to get the first one. And
Thank you.
yeah, that's a very interesting science. I just wanted to elaborate that in case people hadn't
Thank you.
heard of it
Yeah.
before.
I did this test with my kids when they were like 4 and 9 years old. And you can do that with your kids if you have younger kids or young kids. Rice with water in 3 different glasses on a shelf. And I put a label on the glass, love, hate, and on one I did nothing. And I asked my kids to follow this pattern every single day for a week. And they were able to see that the water which was disregarded, we didn't pay attention to it, just didn't do anything. It was like dead water. The one we said, we love you, it had the reddish foam forming on top of the rice. And the one which we said, we hate you, had a brownish one, brownish foam on top of it. So they were able to see the differences when you address water. And another recorded, not necessarily experiment, but fact, South Koreans were down in a bunker in a closed room. They had only a jug of water and glasses on that room, and they talk about how they're going to bomb people. They all got sick next day for 3 or 4 days, sick to their stomach, because they drank the water which was imbued with bad and harmful thoughts. So yes, the water, if you don't pray over it before you drink it, if you do that, it will affect you positively when you drink the water. So you have to be careful, really careful.
Dave, what was that movie called?
What the Bleep? It's on Gaia. If you do Gaia,
What
Gaia.com.
the bleep do we know down the rabbit hole? I think there's 2 of them. There's the first one is, they're both really good, but the first one is my favorite of the 2. But it goes into a myriad of things that will just completely blow your mind. It's really good. Yeah.
I know that you can get, is it the first chapters of this book on your website, Claudiu?
Yes, I think you can download several free chapters on my website. Where the Decadence is free for sure, the whole book. And I think Water Entanglement, if you go to books and Water Entanglement, I think there are free chapters there as well. Because I
Okay,
redesigned the website recently, so.
I grabbed them yesterday. I haven't had a chance to look at them, but I'm looking forward to it. Anyone else have any questions?
When we're done, I'm going to go have a glass of water and talk nicely to it.
Thank you.
Seriously, I'm going to give this a try.
There's so much research. I mean, I read 7 or 8 books before I start writing. There is a lady in Sedona, Arizona. She wrote the Water Code. She's a lawyer, but she downloaded the book. We are very good friends. Another lady, Carly Nudai, she wrote Water Codes. She was very close to Dr. Vogel, which worked closely with crystals and water. So it's a lot of research and very, very interesting if you go deep into the subject. Plus Nina Montano, who was one of your guests recently, she wrote Water Is. She, in fact, because I rubbed shoulders with her, I got inspired to write about water and water entanglement. This is everything started. So.
Yeah, Nina's been here a few times. She's pretty interesting lady. I love that woman.
So we co-host Water Age for Water. Age of Water podcast. We both do that. Yes.
Yes, I'm going to look forward to listening in on that for sure. And maybe we'll get the link to that on our site and maybe our Facebook page as well. Yeah. Anyone else? Any comments or thoughts? No, are we good to go to our next author? I'm sorry, you're all on mute. It's like I want you to answer me. Sorry about that.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you, Claudiu. If we have more questions afterwards, if you think of something else, write it down and ask him after. But now we have Robert Colman, who is a Newmarket-based writer and editor. He's been involved in trade publications for the manufacturing industry for more than 10 years. He's the author of 3 full-length collections of poetry, Democratically Applied Machine, it's a great title, Little Empires, and The Delicate Line, and the chapbook Factory. He received his MFA from UBC in 2016 and served on the editorial board of Prism International from 2015 to 2019. So everybody, Robert Colman.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be back in, well, not in Barrie, but, you know, Barrie adjacent, I guess is what we'll say. I was actually with you 5 years ago with my chapbook, so it's nice to be back. Claudia, I did want to mention, I read a great poem this past week in a manuscript by someone else that's coming out soon, and it was a beautiful image of talking about water around the Titanic and saying, wonder if that water went and fell on the fields of Europe during the First World War. It was a wonderful way of combining those two tragedies, and you know, do the trees remember taking the water and remember the sadness of that? It was so just your reading reminded me of that. It was it's quite amazing. I wish I had the poem with me, but it's quite beautiful. Anyway, nice to be here. As you said, I'm going to be reading from Democratically Applied Machine, which is my new book. Yeah, I'll just get started, I guess. A lot of this book is based on 2 things. The work I do as an editor for a manufacturing magazine for metalworking and machining. And my father's illness, he had Alzheimer's dementia. So the two themes sort of merge in this book to a certain extent. But I'm going to start by reading the first poem I wrote for this book, and the last poem I wrote for this book. I'm going to start with the last one. With this book and with Little Empires, I got to the end of writing the manuscript, and I realized I needed something that would tie everything together. And I sort of sat there with this one, trying to think of what that might be, and was suddenly inspired by a painting that I really love called Landscape near Koblenz by Gerhard Richter, which hangs in the Musée des Beaux-Arts in Montreal. And this became the inspiration for this poem. It's called Middle Distance. Middle distance. Pure dark, you think, could exist there, haven of the animal catalog, expanse of feral lung. But this bucolic only feigns breadth. Air dissembles the confluence ahead. In cloud funk, a tang of aluminum, gas, a boat, a barge. Sure, earth is well, but the city breathes hot on your wolf search, claws glossed. On the hill, you are both not far enough and too close. The problem, Gerhard, is that your hill is our heaven of non-committal, echo-edged trees, the hayfield we can't quite see, a memory heat we can't glean, thought of clogs on cobbles, vowels stretched open on a spinning mule, the pitch of rough-cut steel on a lathe, sounds we hasten from, are saved from. Muted, the soft-eye view confuses the two. All becomes other. In his exiles, homeland, memory, Father gives me pieces of willing loss, our tools, phantom limbs. We can forget so much. The pain has no name. So this next poem was the first poem I wrote for this manuscript, and I know you had Alan Breezemaster up on your last live reading, I think, at We're Up, and he edited my last manuscript, and he saw this poem. He's like, "Oh, you should really add this to your manuscript." I said, "No, I think it really needs to wait for other poems more related to it," and I'm glad I did, because it was the first poem I started, but also the last poem I finished for this manuscript. It took a long time to get it exactly the way I wanted it to be, and then it finally got to the place I wanted it to be. It's called Ghosting the Assembly Line. Watch the car's body trundle into place, hands blurred, houring the births. History. Quaint now, all those mouths that drawled parts, paychecks, dinners, flatware sets. As if our revolutions could still be fashioned, wrench on wrench, turned in unison. Take the minutes now, transcribe notes, penned up the line, white lab coats. Sketch the fingers that tool intention, lean, Kanban, black belts framed above large workstations, intricate knots, each in action, the clean line abstracting passion. The robots wave a greeting. Hear the hum, secondhand vibrato accent of the job shop floor. Work is done in smallness, one part, four, more is required, as operator, accountant, time hoarder, one man a workforce awaiting the order, more like us every day, palms alighting on keyboards, milling down the hours into scrap. So one of the fun things about writing this particular manuscript was that I did a lot of form poetry. And when I say form, I don't necessarily mean, sonnets and that sort of thing, although there are a couple of sonnets in this book, but just sort of playful things to do with poetry. So one of them was to write a poem based on the definitions of part, because I'm always talking about parts in manufacturing. And I thought it would be kind of fun to see how different definitions would play against each other in different poems. I have a couple of poems, one called Part, one called Parts. I'm just going to read the first one. Part. Any of the manufactured objects that are assembled together to make a machine or instrument. A quantity which, together with others, makes up a whole. Involvement, interest, concern, an act, a share. Now, a lot of these poems were inspired by visits to factories. And this next one was an early part of writing this manuscript. And it would have been back in probably 2010, 2011 when I did this visit. And you could sense the frustration in this manufacturer's demeanor, that they're sort of unknown to a lot of people in the community. People don't really know manufacturers unless they live in communities, well, like Barrie, where you actually have a lot of manufacturing. So there you go. And this was a factory in Georgetown. Just, a vague little fact there. It's called Interview with the Machinist. He knows you have forgotten the first breath, the blood and the cut cord. Ask him. He could give you that scream, the blade-freed shape. He worries his clocks on commas, hyphens of steel, bared bones and muscle, intuited in edge and thread. Ask your questions. He shakes his head, unable to conjure an airplane whole, the haunches of an automobile, a patriotic engine chugging a soft shoe. He's rehearsed money, hours, margins, but thinks in the shape of the thing that is nameless until it is freed. His no words turned clean in piecework births. There aren't many funny poems in this book, but this is kind of one of them. I mean, it comes from a serious emotion. The poem is called Seasonal Affective Disorder, and it was sort of my reaction to depression for a while, which is basically imagining my house collapsing around me, and for some reason that calmed me down. So then there became this kind of silly poem. It's called Seasonal Affective Disorder. It was the initial slip that surprised. Oh, sorry, I didn't give you the subhead of that poem, called Seasonal Affective Disorder, or Dreaming the Clawfoot's Crash, an Escape Fantasy. It was the initial slip that surprised, my pimpled backside colliding slantways with the tub bottom as it untucked itself to slide through the rot and tin-thin walls, solemn groundways across the sunroom roof. Armageddon of the mind is so slow. Ice-rhymed, I thought, blue-palmed and patient as stone, I thought. And I thought. But no, it was worse than thought. Sitting still in the frost wash, the glassy light tightening the sheen on this hairless skinflint. No longer thinking, I chucked a bit of rot windward from this old cottage. No spanner to rudder and drum, the basin sighed. So free it made for fence and tree root, and my chest, shuddering wing flap and tantrum, nippled to the audacity of the chain link's reveal. Sodden thunk as it stabbed the trunk, blackened, wet in the snowdreck of thaw. A toe to the snow mash, leaning against the tapmast, the worry knot, the wallow now pierced in chiding air, salt-grimed and squinting in the sun, looking for a new door through which to run. And again, this isn't a form poem, but it came out of a playful exercise in a course I was taking, where the prof basically said, write a poem or a story called Please Write Soon. And it's also one of the few poems I've ever written while traveling for work, which I do a fair bit. So it's very frustrating when you can't write. Anyway, please write soon. The city has broken into my childhood home, defaced the family photos, scored our fixed smiles. Who said we could be anything? That sickness, memory, locked the hotel door, leaving me this slight window, empty inbox. The last few poems I'm going to read are all from the last section of the book, and it's all about a trip I took with my dad. Early in his illness, we went to England to visit family and to visit some places that he really loved, and it became the theme for this section of the book. And each poem is connected with a different place. So that's the subtitle of every poem, is where the poem is set. And this is set in a town called Stockport, which is a suburb of Manchester. It's called Old Friends. Old Friends, Stockport. I think we're away to the pub when Dad legs a quick pivot aft of me, determined beyond the brewery's stables, beetling across the Tombstone Walk, out to the empty fall behind St. Mary's Church, iron fence posts framing his stare. I chase the lane, unsure for us both. Cornbrook Chemical was here, he states, the names of the dead fading underfoot. They made paint colors, spring-fed works like Robinson's across the road. His old workplace, 1950 or so, snatched back into the air. Film on film, is knowing more precious when tenuous? A musk of then now, well housed in the ground survey. We pace downhill to the Arden Arms, the snug, the stopped grandfather clock. Him less agitated now, he's seen or been. What to call staring into a blank space and carving from it your need. Good ghosts, when you know where to look, can walk steady past God and feel solid red brick. So this manuscript wouldn't have been possible without my good friend Shane Nielsen, who edited my Frog Hall chapbook factory. But in the process of putting some of this together, he gave me some challenges, like write a sonnet, write this, write that. And in this case, he said, write a poem with only 4-letter words, and other than the title. So this is that poem. It's called Protest, Manchester. Fuck this loss. Moth-bled dusk, toss away this able coat. Pins don't mark this word suit, this scar-shot mind. Papa, want this nail-hole self, base aura. Moan from this bone-sure cage, what urge pause? Pine rush, wolf ache, fist-hard rain. Call loud, undo, undo. I'll finish off with another form poem. This is a cento or a cento. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, to be honest. but a cento is a poem that you make from other people's words. Basically, you take lines from other people's poems and create a new poem for yourself. And what I did with this one was I took poems about fatherhood and turned it into this poem. And it includes a line from Thomas Lux, who's a great American poet, and it was that line that became the title of the book, Democratically Applied Machine. So this is called Watching, Ludlow. When he had fallen deep asleep and was snoring, when the baby face, an old serious one tarnished in the moistness, gone small, thin salt and blind with tears, what a life he would have lived without them in this democratically applied machine. He hid behind books, and thunder lay down in the hearts. Everything is lost in the fire and lost in the gauging. Fire he will grope back into and crouch down. Thank you.
Very nice. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions, or do you have anything more you'd like to tell us about the book? Or
it's available for $20 through me if you want to get a signed copy. I don't know if everybody's on Facebook, but if you find me on Facebook, just send me a message and I'll ship off a copy to you if you'd like. So that's one little thing. Other than that, I like to say that it's the orangest cover of the year. I'm not sure if that's actually true, but it is very orange, isn't it? The first time I saw it,
that you'd win, yeah.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I was like, I don't know about that, but then it stands out, so I like that. And I should also thank my publisher, Palimpsest Press, and Jim Johnstone, my editor, who did an amazing job and just created a beautiful object, which is always nice when you get your book and it just feels nice in the hand. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, speaking of the cover design, I mean, with the word democratic in it, they probably had to be careful with color so that it wasn't going to be like considered like something of a specific party or a political book in that way. So it would have been a thought.
Well, you know what? It's funny because I don't mind if it's orange, to be honest. But I never even thought of it. That's funny. That's hilarious. I'm sure if it were a different color or if it had an elephant on it, I'd be more concerned. But yeah.
I did have a comment. I just wanted to say that I think it's amazing that you wrote poems about being in manufacturing plants and, just different places of the world where you don't necessarily associate poetry with. I was quite fascinating because I've been in a lot of manufacturing plants myself, and I think I will look at them differently now when I'm walking around. I'll be like, wow, I could, So very neat, very neat.
Thank you. I mean, and I'm sure you get this in working in the electrical business, and I mean, there's a poem I didn't read that was about welding, and it came from a conversation I had with a guy who basically started telling me why pipe welders like to have a certain type of machine. And seriously, I turned on my tape recorder so I could record him because it was poetry, like coming out of his mouth. It could have been a poem all on its own. And then I did some research about different, because welders do have a language of their own. They really do. And I did a lot of research online, finding other phrases that they use and different terms and try to work those into the rest of the poem. And it was just a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, and even I find like every little sort of subculture has its own language, right? So to be able to, that's just one that's not really accessed very much. So it's very, very neat idea to do that, actually.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a similar comment. It's quite unique the way you wrote and how you touch on the subject, because you look at something which is cold, stiff, is there, rusty, and you put your versatility of words into something quite unique. I really enjoy it. And even if it's rusty and looks like inert, even the materials suffer. And again, it's based on research done by J.C. Botch, is a late Indian researcher, very famous in that part of the world. And he proved that when you apply tension to materials, they suffer, they contract, they feel it. Even the metals feel pain pretty much. So
right.
It's in line with what you wrote.
Well, and it's funny you say that because I guess I did give a lot of these things their own personalities. And there's one poem where I had a bunch of terms that I hadn't used and I wanted to use them in the book. And I just wrote around the words. I just sort of put the words down on on a piece of paper and then wrote. And then I thought, okay, now I can go on to the next word. And then I wrote and I went on to the next word. And then it just became something that didn't really have anything to do with manufacturing, but it sort of fed off what I think about those words and what I know from handling them and being involved in it in not generally a hands-on way, but I'm there and aware of it. So yeah, it's interesting how it inspires and yeah, the material reacts. It's alive in its own way. Absolutely.
Well done. Thank you.
Hi, Robert. Thank you. I like how the acronym for your title is DAM. I think that's good, and I really liked SAD, seasonal affective disorder. I've never been very in touch with poetry, but when I close my eyes and I let my brain just think about what you're saying and I can see it, then I enjoy it. So, Linda, if you could, since I'm not a Facebooker, if you could get me a copy and I'll shoot you the money when I see you, if you don't mind. Thanks. And I have to run. I have another engagement. So
thank you for being here. Thank you.
No, thank you for sharing. It's very appreciated. Thank you, Claudiu and Robert, and thanks, Linda, for inviting me.
I'm glad you came, Dave.
I hope I can see you all very soon. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Signed copy.
It never even occurred to me that the title was Damn until somebody else mentioned it after it was published. I'm like, yes, this is fantastic.
The subliminality of it.
That's right.
Take care.
You too.
Bye, Dave.
See you, Linda.
So it's on my to-do list to get a book signed for Dave.
Excellent. Okay.
Consider the order and just let me know how to pay you.
Sure. Yeah. I'll send you a note.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, Dave's not on Facebook. There's a few of our members who aren't. So we've been encouraging them to sign up on our newsletter so they at least get our email. Yeah, so.
Great.
Does anybody else have any thoughts or?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Can I ask a question?
Please do.
The first poem you read.
Yeah.
That starts with the painting.
Yeah.
Can I just ask how you got from a landscape to something mechanical?
Well, you know,
what's the process to get from one thing to the next to the other?
It's funny because Gerhard Richter is if you haven't seen any of his paintings, he's done a whole bunch of different styles, and I encourage you to find. There's a film about him painting and shows him painting abstract work, and it's just very meditative. It's wonderful to just experience. But he had this period where he did these paintings where everything, like, you could see that it was a landscape, or you could see that it was a couple of people, but it was just blurry. Like, so this painting, what I love about it is it has that feel of, right before a rainstorm, when all of a sudden the greens sort of pop out and the sky is gray, but all of a sudden the light is sort of, all the light is emanating out of all the plants and everything like that. And so the feel of this landscape, and there's really nothing to it other than a hillside with nothing on it, but you have a feeling that there's something just beyond the hill. So because it says Koblenz, and Koblenz, that names means confluence in German. And so all of a sudden I think of all these factories that are sort of in the background, and all this life that's happening beyond what we can see, and the landscape is where we're sort of hiding away from all that. And so, yeah, it's like anything. I mean, sometimes a painting can inspire you in a way that makes absolutely no sense. I mean, I don't know if any of you remember the Steve Martin movie, LA Story, where there's a wonderful moment in that film where he's trying to impress a woman, and he's basically standing there saying, "I can't believe what's happening in this painting. This man is doing just so absurd." And then the camera turns, and all you see is this pink expanse across the wall. And you're like, where did he get that from? And I just think that some paintings just have an effect on you where you see what it needs you to see, I guess. I don't know. I guess that's part of it. But on the other hand, I know that Gerhard Richter, that is he thought that way about those paintings, in the sense that they were sort of, there was always something happening just over there that you couldn't see, but was felt in it, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And Robert, if you're looking for sources of inspiration, just came to me right now. Are you aware of Sorel Etrog? He's a Canadian sculptor. He passed away, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. There are several sculptures, big sculptures downtown Toronto, especially along University Avenue. And he had several cycles, and one of them was hinges. And they're very industrial type of sculptures, huge.
Okay.
And you might get some inspiration from that. And he has some cycles, king and queens, in various, in various cycles, very metallic, round shapes, some springs.
Neat.
So you might get inspiration from that. There are images of his sculptures online. And if you end up, publishing another book based on this, I expect, dedicated to Claudiu Murgan for inspiration.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Well, I definitely want to know if you could type that into the chat. I'd like to see that. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Anyone else?
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great that we can share these links and files and things here.
Yeah, I really like that. I mean, I was sort of scared of this before I did it the first time, and then I thought, this is actually really neat, because I mean, people who wouldn't necessarily be able to get to the cafe can enjoy it from home, and yeah, you can get comments going, and good conversation that doesn't necessarily happen when you're in a cafe for whatever reason.
Yeah, actually the format's changed since we came on Zoom. We didn't always have a Q&A because it would kind of depend on the author. So I kind of like that. We get to know you guys a little better and get to know about your process and
Thank you.
in a sort of a different light. So it's kind of a nice and different format.
Actually, there was one last thing I wanted to do, and in recognition of Black Lives Matter and Indigenous lives matter, I thought it would be nice to share a few books that have been part of my reading list during this whole pandemic. That I think, you know, I'm hardly an expert in anything to do with other cultures, but I thought, you know, a lot of people have been sharing lists of books that they've really enjoyed from Black authors and Indigenous authors. And I thought I'd share a few, just a few names that I wanted to share of people that I think people should be reading for sure, in case you don't know them. And some people you could invite to your reading series. For one, Daniel Lockhart, D.A. Lockhart, who's Indigenous poet from Windsor, Ontario. He's prolific. He's written a lot of books, but I think this is one of his best. Devil in the Woods, published by Brick Books, and he's a great guy, and it's a fascinating read. So I totally recommend his work. And Linda, I'll send you a list of these just because I just thought I'd throw this in. But
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing. This is American poet, American Indigenous author, Layli Long Soldier. And it's called Whereas, and this is an amazing book. And Whereas is she talks about the language used to disenfranchise Indigenous Americans in a lot of actions in the United States. But it's a beautiful book out of Grey Wolf Press, and I completely recommend her work for sure. Just because I think it's amazing. And Terrence Hayes, if you haven't read this book yet, or any of his other works, I mean, he's incredible. American Sonnets for My Past and Future Assassin. It's a book of sonnets through Penguin. Came out, I think, last year. I'm not sure, but he's one of the best writers in the States right now.
That's a good title.
Yes, it's amazing, and it is. It's a book of sonnets. About life in America right now, and I can't recommend it highly enough. And the last one I'll mention, just because I mean, I'm sure many of you will have heard of this, but Liz Howard, who won the Griffin Prize a few years ago for this book, Infinite Citizen of the Shaking Tent. I mean, Liz is a phenomenon, and a great Indigenous author that I can't recommend highly enough. But as I said, Linda, I'll send you a list that you know, that personally I'd love to share, and
Yeah,
I have plenty more titles here, but I will leave it at that, because I just felt, you know, at this time I think we should share as many resources as we can and read as much as we can. So again, thank you very much for being a great audience and great questions and comments, and so I really enjoyed it. So I'm looking forward to hearing some of you read your own work.
Mm-hmm.
So we are on this subject of Indigenous people. I really appreciate it, because if you have other titles which are not necessarily poetry but history of Indigenous people, either Canada or US, I made a point to myself to, you know, as a sign of respect, to learn as much as possible. And I ordered books about Indigenous people in Australia, about their healing approaches. They have amazing healing techniques in Australia. So I want to learn more about, you know, the Hopis and the Cherokees here. So if you have this type of resource, like books which are interesting, I really appreciate if you can again add it to the list.
Well, it's funny. I've been looking at a lot of other people's lists. So if I do see anything, I'll let you know for sure, because I just think it's important for all of us to share as much as we can, and to support these authors for sure. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just making myself a note. Great. So thank you guys. That was great, and I really like that you ended it with sharing books by authors of Black and Indigenous cultures, and that's great. We're always seeking authors from all kinds of backgrounds. You know, it's part of our mandate to be inclusive here. So.
Absolutely. Well, Daniel Lockhart, I mean, I've never seen him read, but I love this book particularly. So I will connect you with him. He's on Facebook. I'll make a connection for you or whatever. I'll send you a link to some of his work anyway, so you can consider him for a future one of these for sure.
Excellent. Thank you. Great. So does everybody need a break, or do you just want to continue on with open mic?
Let's go straight to the open mic. Right.
Yeah.
I will have to apologize. I have a hard stop at 8:15, so I will just drop. I won't interrupt anyone. And once again, thank you very much for having me. It's been great. So I'll stay until 8:15.
Okay.
Claudiu.
Okay, great. So who has something to share with us? Anybody?
As I mentioned, I do, but I don't want to go first today because my power is just about out and I'm going to have to run down and get a power cord and plug in up here, but I can listen while somebody else does theirs first, and then whenever it's my turn, it's fine.
Rachel, do you have anything? No? Just listening? Okay. How about Frank? Is it a microphone over your head, Frank? Okay, unmute yourself. You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. I'm going to plug this thing in, so just nod or something. This thing I'm going to plug in, I won't know if you can hear me when it's in. Just give me, but did you want me to just to start?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's in.
Yeah.
Just give me okay. No? Can you, if you can hear me, hear me? Yes, it's in. Just, yeah? Oh, okay. Okay. This is from a poem. Can you hear me? Yeah.
You're cutting out a little bit for me.
In 2014. You can still hear me?
Yeah.
Linda? Yeah? Okay. I'll just read the first little bit of it.
Frank.
And she laid herself down on the bare rug, her blonde hair golden soft, flowing over her shoulders, reaching down her back, where flames on panes warmed her, and she slid over towards the heat, so he could feel her warm on his cold skin, where the cold had frozen him solid, and the raven had pecked his eye out as he stared through the snow, through the night, towards the river, deep and frozen and flowing under the ice, where he had cut a hole for a stray to drink openly, beside the food he left by the rock, white and round and marbled, where he liked to sit in the morning when the sun was up and the dew was on the grass, in the morning before the birds were up and on the water. It's a 2,000-word poem. It's like a short story. It's so long, so that's all I'm going to read. Can you nod or wave if you can hear the piano? Colleen, I can see you.
Yes.
You can hear it?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a song that has a poem in it that anyway, of course I did it. What I say. Can you hear my voice? What I see. What I see. What did I say? Went on a walk today, seeing if I could find my What I say, what I see. What did I say? I book out poetry. How long I got memoir. Oh, what I see. Oh, what I see. What did I say? I see you and me under a fine oak tree, you and me. Oh, what I see. Oh, what I see. What did I say? And I saw a poem under that tree. And this is what that poem said to me. Love, love, the soul rides the wind of the eagle and finds self on the way to victory. There are no more suns to pass. The sun of the soul has awakened to destiny. What I say, oh, what I see. What did I say? Only you and only you There you go. I hope you heard some of it.
Yeah, that's great.
I pulled the part.
And that was good. That was interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've never heard you sing before, so that was lovely.
Oh, well, you may never want it again. I'm in the shower.
No, it was fun. It was nice to have, you know, the different vibe. But that's what I love about the open mic is that there's so many different things people are creating. So
That's perfect.
Yeah,
perfect
right,
music for perfect music for a night like tonight. So thank you.
yeah.
You're welcome. Thank
Good.
you. It's nice
So-
to do something.
Yeah.
Oh, my glasses. Bruce, are you ready to go? You all plugged in?
Yep, sure. Yeah, I've got power. All right. This is a short story a lot of my short stories, not all of them, have a dark twist to them. This one's called The Collector. This is part 4. I've been reading them serially at these events, and so this is part 4 of 4. And just a little background for a few of you who haven't heard of the previous parts. Natalie and her best friend, Fran, are collectors of Barbie dolls. And they attend the annual Barbie convention, which happens to be in their town of Seattle that year. Afterwards, they're having discussion over some pasta, and we discover that in 3 years since her divorce, Natalie hasn't found a guy ready to take on a ready-made family. And she's a little frustrated with that, but she tells her friend Fran that she's going to give her latest boyfriend, Ricky, one more chance, in spite of the fact, much to Fran's horror, that he has been physically abusive and has a drinking problem. But they're going to meet at a country bar, and he promises he's not going to drink. And she's hoping to introduce him to her daughters. So they go to the bar, and unbeknownst to her, in between dances and stuff, he's kind of slipping by the bar and grabbing some shots of vodka. And they return home to her house at an early time because her eldest daughter, Barb, is babysitting. And when we ended off last time, he was in the house, stumbling a little bit, and discovers that her daughters are really Barbie dolls and not little girls at all. So I'll read the last little section that I did and go on from there. Natalie bounded up the stairs. He followed. And index finger to her lips, she eased a bedroom door open and signaled Rick to come forward. Aren't they beautiful? They look so innocent when they're sleeping. He leaned against the door frame beside her. How many do you have? 22. I adopt a new one every year. She looked down at Barb, nestled in her arms. Barb has been a wonderful big sister. She's a terrific help. Do they all have their own beds? Yes. And different names? Of course. He took a step back into the hall. Of course they do. Natalie tucked Barb into her tiny bed, lifted a Roald Dahl novel from the bookshelf, and sat cross-legged on the floor. She held up the book. We're almost through Matilda. Barb loves it. She adjusted a small comforter covering the doll. Don't you, darling? And started to read. Rick remained in the hall. She motioned for him to come in. He hesitated and grumbled. She paused at the end of the paragraph. What did you say? Yeah, if this is the drill, I'm good. He tried to sit, lost his balance, and almost landed on her lap. His arm around her, she snuggled into him and continued reading. His hand slid over her top and groped her breast. Natalie lowered the book and pushed him away. Stop it, not in front of Barb. What will she think? Rick rolled his eyes. She's a damn doll, she can't think. Misery cut through Natalie's heart. He doesn't understand. I was sure he was different from the others. He leaned in and pawed her other breast. Damn it, Rick, stop. What's the matter? You were hot and horny back at the bar. Let's get to it. He twisted, placed a hand on each of her shoulders, and forced her to the floor. She squirmed. Before his lips found hers, she pushed at his chest. A twinge of pain spread out from her shoulder blade. His weight pressed down. Rick, stop, you're crushing me. Please, not like this, not in front of the girls. The pressure on her chest eased. He sneered. Loosen up, we both want this. What's the doll gonna do, get ideas and fuck Ken? He laughed and dropped back down, his hardness evident. Her arms strained against his weight, bearing down on her chest. Fingers flew down her thighs, grabbing at the hem of her skirt. His mouth sucked the air from hers. Her lungs convulsed. A labored breath drew in some relief. She clenched her fists and pummeled the sides of his head. He shifted slightly. Air flowed. She hit him again, bit his bottom lip and clamped down. He screamed. A drop of blood hit her cheek. Get off me. Not a chance. I'm gonna get what I came for. He tugged harder at her skirt. She threw an awkward punch into his chin and drove a thumb into his eye. He howled, clasped his face and rolled. She shoved him aside, got to her feet and ran. 1 foot through the door, her upper body stopped with a jerk, his fingers digging into her right shoulder. She dipped and reeled, drove an elbow into his side. Teetering, one hand pressed over his eye, he grabbed her arm. She broke free, sprinted away from the bedroom, and dove down the flight of stairs. Her footsteps, his footsteps, then cursing followed. She glanced over her shoulder. He launched himself forward. She grabbed the bottom stair post and swung around it like a door on hinges. Rick snagged her top. He crashed to the floor. She spun, tripped over his body, managed to stay upright, and sped into the kitchen. A howl followed her. She lunged at the sink, grabbed the tap for support. Before she could breathe, he was there. He grasped her bicep and yanked. Like stretching and releasing an elastic, she held tight, resisting his pull, then let go of the tap and spun, using the momentum to drive a foot into his knee. At the same time, her elbow smashed his cheek. He buckled, fell, and latched onto her ankle. Her right foot immobilized, she leaned over the counter and focused on the knife lock in the corner. Nails clawed up her bare leg. Ignoring the horrible sensation, she concentrated on the black handles protruding from the wooden block. The counter edge dug into her belly. Stretching, one fingertip brushed a knife. An arm wrapped around her waist and jerked her back. Her fingers closed on air. Rick's right hand slid up the outside of her thigh. A finger hooked the waistband of her panties and yanked, stretching the fabric at an angle across her butt. Twisting, she saw he was on one knee, his leg splayed. Raising her left knee between her body and the counter, Natalie delivered an awkward backward kick to his groin. It lacked power, but his hold loosened. She pushed up, propelling herself across the counter, her right arm fully extended. Her palm felt the knife's handle, fingers closed. Rick dragged her back. She went willingly. The knife slid from the holder, the handle firmly in her grip. Feet back on the floor, Natalie swiveled and leered down at him, her breathing erratic. Each audible puff slower than the one before, like a locomotive pulling up to a platform. I thought, a puff. You were different. Another puff. You said you liked kids. The words were exhaled more than spoken. I thought we had a chance to be a family, but you're just like all the others. Rick released her leg and staggered to his feet, his bloodshot eyes swollen, his face ruddy, nostrils flared, fists tight, a bull ready to gore. You're fucking crazy. You don't have daughters, just junks that stink in plastic. She watched his gaze follow the steel blade wavering in her hand. He wiped saliva and blood from his chin. I'm out of here. I don't want nothing to do with you. You're not leaving me. Her hand steadied. Breathing slowly, she fed on the fear in his eyes. Her voice dropped to a low growl. No one walks out on me and my girls. No one. The butcher knife swung over her head and sliced downward. The blade dug into his shoulder, jarring in her hand as it deflected off bone. He stood frozen, disbelief across his face. His hand went for the knife. Natalie ripped the blade out. A line of blood traced a path across his palm. He stared at it and staggered. She drew the knife back, turned the blade horizontal and plunged it into his chest. He sank to his knees, one eye open wide. Falling sideways, his head slammed against the ceramic tiles. The veins in his neck bulged. He coughed. Blood and pink foam pooled around his mouth. A puddle spread onto the floor from his chest. He flinched. His lips moved. Leaning against the counter, her lungs heaving, she waited until his body was still. Grabbing the dishcloth from the sink, she wiped up as much blood as she could, then pulled one towel after another from a drawer until each turned crimson. When the drawer was empty and the blood contained, she pulled him away from what remained. She removed his blood-streaked shoes, looped her arms under his, and lugged his lifeless body to the basement stairs. Struggling under the weight, she descended backwards, one step at a time, his heels thudding against each tread. She lugged him across the rec room and into the walk-in cooler. Arranging his corpse in a sitting position on the floor, he sat, resting his head on the shoulder of another, whose hollow-cheeked face was gray and gaunt with death. She nodded at a third, sports coat-clad cadaver sitting with its back rigid against the opposite wall, its mouth open in a grotesque grin. Natalie relaxed, her breath visible, suspended in the frigid air. She picked up a hairbrush from a shelf and stepped forward to comb what was left of Tony's long black hair. The pressure of the brush caused the dried and shriveled carcass to sway gently on the meat hook suspended from the ceiling. She spoke in a sing-song voice. "No story tonight, boys. Ricky was bad. You need to learn how to be nice to girls." She returned to the kitchen, scrubbed and bleached the floor, the basement steps, and the path to the cooler. With the knife washed, bleached, and resting safely in its varnished holder, she trotted upstairs, wiping down walls and railings on the way to check on the girls. Stepping into the bedroom, she placed her right palm over her heart. Fortunately, the commotion hadn't woken them. After showering, a cup of coffee by her side, she sat down at the kitchen table and scrolled through the entertainment section of a local paper. She stopped at an ad for Josie's Red, White, and Blues, the best blues north of New Orleans, dressed to impress. This looks interesting. I really do need to start looking for my Kens in more upscale places. And that's the end.
That's pretty good. I was half hoping she'd stab him with the Barbie.
And for those that you missed the beginning part, her husband was a butcher. And that's had the walk-in cooler.
Right. That took definitely a dark turn. I was not expecting.
Yeah.
Well, somebody left, so they didn't find it interesting. Yeah, some of my stories do have dark turns at the end. So anyway, thank you for giving me the opportunity to go through it all in stages.
Yeah.
Obviously too long to do in one evening.
I really liked the fight scene too. I could really see what was happening. It was very well done.
Yeah.
I was really engaged.
Yeah, the fight scenes aren't always very easy to do. So
Yeah.
Good job. Do we have anyone else for open mic? Nobody's interested this time? Okay, it's me then.
All right.
Okay, so I'm working on a novel. It's a utopian. I know we like the dystopian stuff these days, but I'm working on a utopian climate fiction set in the future. So in the prologue, which I read many months ago, probably December, you meet Skylar, who is a singer and an activist who's just been shot and killed, and that would be in about, I keep changing my mind, so it's either going to be 2040 or 2065. So a little bit in our future, but in more of a time that we can kind of sort of recognize what we think it might look like. So in the first scene of chapter 1, which is called Rough Landing, we're going to see the people who discover a satellite, which she and some other survivors are going to be in. Although I suppose unless you read the blurb, which I also haven't written yet, you're not going to really know yet. So hopefully I'll just read the first scene, which hopefully isn't too long. I spent so much time trying to figure out what I was going to read. I didn't time it. So hopefully it's not too far beyond like the 5 minutes. So rough landing of a book that's called The Fallen. I saw a glimmer of light near it in the communication satellite. The 3 techs of the Delhi Control Center had been remotely repairing. It had been sending spotty signals. I caught sight of it in 2 cameras on nearby satellites. One of the controllers spoke out in excited surprise. What on earth is that? He only recognized it by how it pushed their object a smidgen off its trajectory. It had fallen out of orbit before anyone, even I, knew it had existed. It was unimaginable that there could be any satellites like this left undocumented. I locked onto it, configured its relative mass to tractor it in just in time. It could have been a highly destructive landing. There didn't need to be any dents in Mother Earth or any lost souls. It didn't quite fall within my planned landing grid, which in hindsight was best. Instead, it pounded into Pico Tenupa in Enciano del Rio. I advised worldwide communities of the event as it unfolded, sharing all data and captured imagery. I sent out a call for a science team to explore the wreckage and manage the cleanup of this mysterious object. 5 qualified specialists answered within minutes. I dispatched trams to pick up 3 of them who were working the gardens in a community near the crash site at Pico Tenupa. The other 2 were within walking distance from their chopper pad in Media community, a few hours travel north. As I had them transported south to Arbol, another chopper was loaded with safety equipment and the tools they'd need to analyze and document the artifact and initiate the chemical cleanup. "Hello, team," I said cheerfully, using audio only. As all had finally arrived, "Please secure yourselves for the flight to the crash site. There is water at each seat if you need it." "Hello, they said, one by one. "Yeah, I'm parched, long trip here," one of my men, Gabe, said, filling his packet. "By the looks of the beast and the nature of its data signal, the downed object is from the era of greed and avarice." Most of the group gasped and looked at one another with open mouths, momentarily ignoring the individual bags of safety gear they had been sifting through. It was the era that caused the collapse of a world economy and culminated in the dramatic demise of the ecological system. Any known survivors from that time had to go underground to escape extreme weather events that eventually turned the planet into Snowball Earth. "That's old. There's no telling how many dangers that could pose," Maya said as she pulled out her protective silver suit by its shoulders. "Truth," I said. There could be radiation from the unit just from its time in orbit, even if it is safe from other hazards. Please be vigilant in your safety measures." The team expressed their resounding agreement. None of these people would ever have experienced radiation sickness or poison from anything unnatural. I presented current satellite video with annotations of the wreckage of the craft for all to see as they began to appear. The drones I directed to the site to act as probes had arrived and swiftly revealed the object's worn and scraped name. We could make out USA Second Chance. The science team flyover offered them a first-hand view of the crash site, showing the Earth had suffered only a minor bump. I slowed its entry into the atmosphere and controlled the speed enough to avoid an explosion. We discovered a small mound at the object's base and minimal sparks, making the fire hazard low. We certainly didn't want the lush jungle that cradled it to catch. "Better than expected," the team agreed. They turned the chopper into a base of operations while I ordered small probes to survey the outer rim and to open and enter the antiquated bucket of bolts. The visuals showed what appeared to be the usual unremarkable technology from that era: metallic bolts and nuts and simple cylinder-shaped construction with damaged gadgets attached to dented, flimsy panels. Its solar wings had broken off and burned up on entry. What did make it remarkable? It had held orbit for that long without fuel. One of the probes unscrewed a round door, turned its brights on, and flew inside. USA Second Chance was repeatedly inscribed on the rough interior walls. A narrow corridor ran through the center. More of the probes entered from behind, their beams fractured by eerie black shadows as they buzzed along. Oblong cases, a little over 3 meters in length by 1.5 deep, lined the interior circular walls. Each was hitched to the wall by what might have been pipes and wires. One heavy clamping system with a wide bar that circled the walls secured a row of 10 capsules. As the probes continued to explore, they sent back detailed videos showing 5 sections, just like the first, with a total of 50 capsules. This could be dangerous, Gabe said, securing the back of his partner's suit pack. Could be chemical. War supplies? Ancient diseases? Maya's shaky voice was muffled by her helmet. If just one of those containers is cracked or leaks or falls off, we could experience the return of deadly disease like Ebola or a Hanta or coronavirus or any number of ancient horrors, I said. As each of them shuddered at the thought, I saw the red of their heat signatures increase. Gabe asked into the air. Have you done a search on USA Second Chance? Absolutely. This is a seminal moment. It's as interesting as uncovering a pyramid beneath the jungle. I should have tried not to sound so excited. I found nothing in any official archives, personal communications, and in one news announcement, there are discussions that the satellite was funded by various capitalist organizations looking for a leap on their competitors by renting observation services. So, a spy machine? What does that name signify? Maya asked. I could see through her helmet cam that she was already fogging her helmet. The probe is revealing all of this cargo. Yes, I see this as well, I said as I appeared. I forget how tall you are, Gabe said as he and a few others' vitals showed increased calm at my image. I'm looking forward to the day I have earned wisdom hairs as you have, Maya said. I pursed my lips and bowed in thanks. The probe hovered silently over one of the big metal cases. It blew swift, rapid-fire wafts of air at it and reached out its metallic arm with a swab to rub dust and debris off the top. The team could clearly read the words, Skylar Khalid. What's a Skylar Khalid? Gabe asked. I put my hand to my ear as though listening to a message from elsewhere. It helps to give them a sense of my process, however inaccurate. Oh, well, isn't that interesting? Skylar Khalid was a famous singer who was shot while performing before a large amount of people. Just below the name, the probe directed its brights into a little window. The team gasped. Is that? Yes, a girl? A human being? They sucked in the air of the logistics room of the chopper. My sensors showed 2 turning cold. No one listens to me, I laughed, attempting to lighten the team's sense of fear. Yes, it's a young woman. Second Chance is a cargo ship, indeed. She was launched by a corporation called BioShare in 2070. Their main service was to cryogenically freeze people nearing their death and some already deceased, in the hopes that they could be revived and healed at a future date. That sounds unrealistically hopeful, Maya said. The probe, consisting of rings of long cylinders, continued through the dark ship that contained humans from a long past era, until it came upon similar but much smaller units. Please don't tell me those are babies. You're not going to like this, I said. They're heads. Just heads? As in severed heads? Of what? Or of whom? Maya asked as she walked out, a heavy case in hand, down the chopper ramp into the bright sun. Human heads, I answered. How barbaric, Gabe said, following Maya. I understand some had body image issues back then, but ew. I laughed, so the team snickered along uncomfortably as they left the safety of the vehicle and ventured towards the crash site. How many? Why? Heads were a less expensive offering. Expensive? I don't understand. Gabe looked over the small opening of the satellite that the drones had entered. Their society was commodity-based. People had to acquire money. It could be quite unequal, I responded. Please be careful with your cargo. Let's get them to the healing lodge to see what we can do for these people. You're not saying we can revive them. Can we? Should we? We will decide as a community. Meanwhile, we should be prepared. The populace have been watching our progress, as always. I am sending out requests for menders and additional technicians to extract and transport them to the nearby healing lodge. It would be interesting to know an actual person from 2070, Gabe said to his partner, as he opened his tool case and began wrenching open a side panel large enough to allow them to walk inside. Imagine an actual living time capsule. I suppose, his mate said as she swayed her handheld monitoring equipment. It crackled at the radiation. His face turned blue as it gave him the chills. Let's get them out of here safely and decide how to handle these frozen artifacts, I suggested.
Yay.
So it wasn't too boring?
Oh, that was great.
Okay, because it's the first chapter, it's got to be decent, right? And I'm like seeing more typos. I've edited this so many times and it's still got stuff.
Yeah, it's funny when you read it, all of a sudden you can see it differently, right? And you see all your typos and stuff that you don't see when you normally read it.
Yeah, and repeat words and yeah. Yep.
That's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Because everybody looks at how bad things are going to get, and it's interesting to reverse that around.
Mm. Yeah, I am going to reverse it. So you're not going to know who the bad guy is, because there's usually good guy, bad guy, right? So you're not going to know who that is exactly until near the end. So it's going to be hopefully an interesting twist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're basically gonna go into this hippy dippy peaceful world. It's full of bright colors and art and, you know, different from ours.
So presumably the utopia is not what it seems, though?
Maybe, maybe not.
Have to wait and see.
That's right. I have to be patient.
Yeah, I gotta write the damn thing first. Yeah, I'm going back and fixing stuff from this up to chapter 6 I'm working on, but then I'm also working between 6 to 9. So,
Nice.
yep. Anyway, okay.
Excellent.
So next word up is July 9th, and we will be here again on Zoom. We have Barbara Kyle booked, who is the author of the acclaimed Thornley Saga, a 7-book series of historical novels set in 16th century England. Riveting Tudor drama, says USA Today, and of contemporary thrillers, including Beyond Recall, which was Literary Guild selection. Her latest novel is The Man from Spirit Creek, which I just like the title. Mm-hmm. Over 500,000 copies of her books have been sold in 7 countries. So Barbara Kyle has taught at the U of T. She's got a book called Page Turner to teach writing, and Your Path to Writing a Page Turner is a Udemy bestseller. Do you guys know what Udemy is?
No.
No.
UDEMY, and you can go get courses there, all kinds of different kinds of courses. Barbara has helped launch many writers to published success, including best-selling mystery author Robert Rottenberg, award-winning historical novelist Krista Bezos, and Bruce Gardner, and our own sci-fi author Colleen Winter.
Oh.
Yeah, before she started writing, she's had this 20-year acting career in TV, film, and stage in Canada and the US. So I suspect she's going to be a lot of fun to listen to. So that's next month. Barbara